Are live. Can you all hear me? Can we get some audio feedback? Greetings to all. All right, let's start this thing. Welcome to Loud and Clear with Glenn Schick, where we talk about mastering, audio production, and the things that make records translate in the real world. I'm Glenn Schick, and I'm a mastering engineer of over 3 decades. Greetings from lovely Reykjavik, Iceland. It has been a spectacular start of our summer in almost 60 degrees. Nice. It's been a beautiful weekend before this and a nice week so far. And we've made it all the way up to episode 12. And I think you guys are going to like this one. We have a lovely guest today. I've been a fan of his for oh, goodness, a while now, but we are going to talk to a gentleman in California, in Los Angeles. His name is Maor Applebaum. How did I do on the pronunciation here? Do we have your audio? Oh, hold on. Let me get your audio up here. Your mic is muted here. Can you unmute your? Yeah, there you go.
Hello.
Hi. Did I
Only
kill your
audio
name?
engineers will mute their mics, right?
How did I do on the pronunciation of your name?
You
Maor Applebaum.
Yeah, it's probably, you're 85 to 90% there. It's going to be very difficult because the real pronunciation is Maor Applebaum. But, you have to have the, so at least you're 85 to 90%, and that's a lot.
Yeah, I think we were discussing earlier that both of our names get massacred on a regular basis. So, mine is like Schnick, Schlick, Schmick, Shake, and I think your Mayor and what are the other ones you get all the time?
Mayor,
Yeah,
Mayor, Muar. I mean,
well, regardless of this, for those new to Maor, his work goes back quite some ways. We're talking also you're a 3-decader now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
okay.
audio, yeah, 3 decades.
Yeah, yeah.
in audio.
So, while he's not as old as me, he certainly has almost the same amount of experience. And we are looking at 30-something years of credits now. And among his credits, I'm going to just spit out a couple here. The Dresden Dolls, Sabaton, Starset, Bumblefoot, Halford, and I'm a huge Priest fan, by the way. Def Leppard, Voivod, also a big Voivod fan. Dream Theater. It's just as we were talking, we had a little pre-air convo, and we were talking about how everybody wants the clientele that the other guy has, and Maor has some of my favorite artists, so I'm a bit jealous.
Don't be jealous. You have a bunch of your own. Believe me, like we said, the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Yeah.
But you've done very well for yourself. So
I'm okay. I'm gonna stick around for another month or two. So it's all good. So yeah, your work kind of spans across not just metal stuff, even though that's certainly one of your strong genres, I would say. But you do rock stuff, you do like audiophile projects, reissues. So you have a pretty wide canvas of clients, don't you?
I like to keep it that way. I sometimes I'm more known on a certain genre because there's like icons in that field, so immediately it sticks to you. But I've done a lot of prog rock records. I've worked with Yes. I've done 6
Dream
albums
Theater.
with them. Dream Theater.
Yep.
I've worked with solo artists that were in the prog field. I've worked with Meatloaf. I've worked, so it's even in the blues like Walter Trout or Eric Gales. I like the gamut of like, moving from like classical music to jazz to metal to avant-garde, gothic, industrial, punk, hip hop, pop. reggae. I mean, I like all the styles. I probably get the more eclectic stuff due to the nature of what I tend to work with, you
Mm,
know. But yeah, I think touching different areas, and I think it's more of an old school thing where just like you, me, and a lot of other old school mastering engineers, we were handed different things and we were dealing with it. Where I think there's more new school where they're more specific to stuff, which is good because then they can hone on the style and sound and deliver what people are looking for exactly, like, oh, that's his sound, and they go there. And
right.
but but there's still people who do all types of stuff. And I think
Sure.
it keeps us kind of like on our feet. It's like, what do I do now? This is different. I have to figure it out.
It's fun to, like, not know what's gonna be coming to your way next week, and when you get it, it's always kind of like I had a really nice surprise, this past week. It was an artist I've always really liked, and, they sent me her song, and I was just like, "Oh, I get to work with this person now," and I'm so it was like a happy, surprise package somebody gave me. So, I still kinda get excited over stuff, as I'm sure you do, so,
Yeah. And
mm,
I find that sometimes there's a project that comes in that maybe musically you don't know it, but the sonics of it.
mhm.
And then you're like, okay, I don't know all the intricates of the genre, but I know the aesthetics of this one and this one, like the few aesthetics that are covering those things. And then as long as you can bring something to the table that really helps it, then we've done our job. So it doesn't mean you always have to know 100% the genre. It's more that you need to understand the aesthetics.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
last week, I kind of made a statement, and a couple people caught on to what I was saying, was that mastering is musicology. And I think more than any other part of the audio chain, you and I, and other mastering engineers are musicologists by nature. Would you agree?
Totally. It's funny you mentioned that. Yesterday, I had uh, uh, an artist come here, and he played his music, and we were discussing it. And I said, it sounds like you're very influenced by Styx. And he looks at me. He said, and it's hard to hear it exactly, but you can hear on the vocals. He's like, that's the most influential band, And then I said on a different song, it was like, I see you have kind of the vibe of the bass lines and Yes, but in the later Yes. But I also hear what it was that you like Kansas, and then he played me a different song, and I was like, "Do you like Thomas Dolby?" He says, "It's funny. I don't listen to him, but the mix engineer told me I sound like Thomas Dolby."
That's cool.
So it's like, in a way, we kind of have to be exposed to stuff, and to just get the aesthetics, get the styling, also the eras. If you look, 90s, 80s, 70s. It's
Yep.
like, of course, 60s and 50s, but or 2000. It's good to know where things are located. Because if a band is bringing you like, oh, we love grunge, okay, so grunge, okay, that's the 90s, and if you try to make a current grunge, it doesn't sound grunge, it sounds like something else.
Right.
So you make a decision, wait, where am I pushing this to, a current sound, or you guys want to have that grungy feel?
Right.
And then, like, sometimes they'll be like, you know what, we actually want to go back. Okay, then you bring them that sound, and they're like, yes, we never thought that we can actually sound like that.
Yeah, the mastering is more than just turning knobs. It's really knowing your client and knowing where the genre fits, and like you said, where the timing fits as far as like what decades, what's the romance that they fell in love with when they wanted to write their music. So you want to kind of bring that to the table when you're doing the mastering and bring it home for them. So
Right. I can give you a good example.
please.
Um, when you do, you probably know this also. When you do a comeback record for a band, okay, that's like the most stressful thing for the band because now they're like 10 years, 20 years not doing it. I don't know, 15 years, whatever. You got to bring them back to where they stopped if they're continuing that vibe, you got to continue it. You can't be like, okay, well now we're in the 2020 something. It's no, it's a comeback record. There, people are expecting it to feel as a progress, but naturally, not like a quantum leap, but more like, when I this was probably what, like 11 years ago, I did a comeback record for Faith No More.
Hmm.
And I think they were not doing records since 98.
Wow.
So that record was darker and more eerie and crazier, but it had to kind of connect with what they did with, the last record they did, Album of the Year, and the one before, King for a Day. So it
Hmm.
had to be kind of a natural progression. And
Continuity. Yeah.
yeah, kind of feel like they never stopped, right?
Hmm.
And and it turned out like that, and I was very conscious to what's coming in, and like, not alienated, right? And then a year after, I remastered the first record they had, the indie record they had, which was We Care a Lot.
Hmm.
It's called the We Care a Lot, the Deluxe Band Edition.
Right.
And I got the original mixes to work with. And so I didn't want to like change it drastically. So it's like totally different. But I wanted to emphasize what was back then less, no, like prominent in the mix, like, the low end, the
Sure.
bounciness, which that was the emphasis of what to do in the master, like get the resolution better and get the jumpiness and the groove and all that. So taking to what we were talking, like in mastering, a lot of times, I won't say we're an encyclopedia of music, but we have to be knowledgeable of different eras, different sounds, different aesthetics, because we're handed something
Right.
and we're not inventing it. We're,
Yeah,
we're not
and
creating
the
it.
respect for, what people have done before, like you said, is really important as well. I would imagine, with, like, something like Faith No More, that, the stuff that you're kind of cognizant of is, now you're taking a legacy band and you're mastering them for modern stuff. So, would I be right to say that you're when you said more bottom, like, modern music has more sub information than older music. So, is that something that you focused on, say, for Faith No More?
It wasn't about being modern. It was more about, now there's the ability to do that. So
Mhm.
when you hear like a song like We Care a Lot, it's very driven on the bass guitar,
Right.
right? And it has a lot of mids penetrating, but you can have some low end to push with the drums.
Right.
So it wasn't like, oh, now we're modern, so we have to make it modern. It was more like, this record was done, I think, what is it, 85 or something like that? And it was indie.
Mhm.
Okay. So 84, 85. So back then, maybe there was limitations to what they could have done in terms of the mastering process, in terms of, of the whole process too. So
Mhm.
it was more about, now I have the originals and I can emphasize the frequencies that I think could be, bigger, but
Right.
not in order to be modern, more just to bring something into it that just enhances the feel of it, the bounciness of it, the
Right.
groove. It was,
It's not it's not an exaggerated thing, it's just letting whatever was there breathe more now that we have more ability, am I correct?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's like the technology lets us do this, and we're not alienating it from the original. We're just giving it what back then was harder to do.
Right.
Okay, and now we can, and it stays in the same realm. It just makes you move more,
Yeah.
but it's the same song, it's the same production and mix. It just feels more enhanced or enriched.
Right. Do you remember, like, your very first credit, like, ever, and remember roughly what year that was in?
There's stuff I did that was uncredited.
Yeah, of
And there was
course.
stuff back in the MySpace days where I would take these like really small bands, that not only they sounded horrible, I made them from horrible to less horrible, but they
Right.
stayed horrible.
Sure.
Or from bad to, no, no, let's
You
from
improved it.
sounding like I would say this. I have a term. You know how they say you can't polish a turd,
Right.
but I say you can make it smell better.
Okay.
Okay, so
A little
but
ps ps
you know, my what you say?
I said a little cologne, on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that in mastering a lot of what we do is like I think the good mastering is mastering that makes you feel like that was there originally,
Mhm.
meaning we divert attention. Okay, in a way, it's kind of like smoke and mirrors. In a way, that's why when people say mastering is not a dark art, I have to disagree. I think it's a dark art. I think maybe you can do it. There's specs that you can go with and say, "Oh, I'm doing this and that." But I think the dark art in mastering is the decision making behind what are you recovering, what are you not, what are you hiding, and that's the dark art of it because you make decisions which maybe on the outside nobody will know, and then they're like, "Oh, wow, it feels different." Yeah, so I do look at it as a dark art, but not like dark like witchery, but more of like our decision making is not something we can always explain.
It's not obvious, and honestly, what you said just now is a perfect example. Last week, somebody was saying, "Why are you doing all this conceptual stuff, like telling about the concepts behind mastering instead of showing me how to do it?" And, I was trying to explain to him that I don't do the same thing on any 2 masters, and everything is dependent on the material. And again, the genre, and again, the, want of the client, and, how you interpret it. And, what you said perfectly fits into the fact that what we do is conceptual, and, it's, not really a trick. There's no EQ tricks, there's no compression tricks. It's really a listening skill.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that sometimes knowing more where the record is going, it actually helps us figure out. Like I'll give you an example. Um, when worked with Rob Halford, I worked with his band Halford.
Right.
I started working with Fight. I did a
Mhm.
remaster of Fight, but when I did the Halford band, um, I did live albums and I did studio albums.
Right.
And Rob has a huge audience in Europe and South America, of course, and he has an
I'm one of
audience
them.
here. What you say?
I'm one of them.
Right, you're now in Europe.
Yeah.
And of course, he has a big American crowd. I mean, Judas Priest is huge in the States, but his music is more European in the style of sound. The low end is not a big low end. It's more tight, and
Mhm.
it's more the articulation in the high end and the high mids. And when I was doing those records, I did the Winter Songs, which is Halford 3, and I did Made of Metal, which is Halford 4.
Mhm.
And then I did Live in Anaheim, Live in Super Sadama Arena. I did the Rock and Rio, and I did a bunch of like these special editions. And one of the things that it was always important for me is I wanted to make sure that the sound is what I called Euro American. So the Europeans love it
Right.
and the Americans like it too. Okay. Because I knew that a lot of the audience is in Europe, you
Right.
know, and if I make it kind of not too much this and not too much that, it's going to work, and it did,
Right.
and some of those live shows that we did, because we did also CDs and DVDs, and there were different mixes
Right.
for CD and DVD, different masters, of course,
Of course, yeah.
and there were a lot of Priest songs there. Like the band actually played really good Priest,
Sure.
with Alfred.
Yeah.
So that was one of the approaches, is to keep it very organic. Um, each Halford record I did was different. Like the two studio albums were very different from each other. The live albums were very different from each other. And I used to do also surround back then. So I did a bunch of 5.1s.
Me too.
So, that was the end of the era of 5.1.
Yep.
Um, and it was really about like knowing the songs. Yeah. I mean, and I knew the songs because I knew the pre-songs, and of course I knew the Halford because I was working on them. And
Right.
then knowing the audience too was, I think, very critical to the results. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't expect something with a lot of low end or bombastic or even compressed to hell. Like, it was, the dynamics were still there.
Right.
So,
So now, over the decades, uh, what do you think has really fundamentally changed as far as like mastering, like how you would approach something 20 years ago versus how you approach something now? Or is it the same to you?
well, I grew up. I was a kid. Well, look, as we age,
Mhm.
we make different decisions. Some things that we used to neglect, now we're like, no, no, this is important. And some stuff that we might be like too into, now we're like, no, 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 it's good with, our perspective changes. Also, the way music is handed to us is different than before.
For sure.
Okay. Now we're getting mixes that are way more processed than before. Uh, Expectations are also different from us. You know, if back then it was, we'll fix it in the mix and then some of it may be in the mastering. Now it's, maybe we'll fix it in the mix. We probably will fix it in the mastering. There's more of that happening. Um, Also, a lot of people who work in music now, even not pay job, but just do music, they read more, they're more
Knowledgeable.
working with the stuff, so they
Mhm.
kind of know stuff and they'll throw you ideas, sometimes wacky, sometimes good. Oh, you can do this and put it in MS. And I was like, wait, 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 wait. Did you try that before? So I think definitely things have changed.
Mhm.
Technology wise, plugins have gone quantum leaps
Yeah, no, I
ahead.
was all analog, back when I started too, and never would touch a plugin when I started. So yeah, I'm with you.
So that changed, but what's the biggest change is not actually the plugins. That's what people see on the
Mhm.
surface. But the biggest change is actually the headphone technologies,
Mhm.
that even the cheap ones now are quite good.
Mhm.
The converter technologies for consumers, that jumped quantum leaps now.
Yeah, I agree.
And then so your listening options, even Bluetooth, which is a very limited format, now even sounds way better. So and then so headphone technology, speaker technology too,
Yeah,
because of the whole DSP element that you can put now in speakers. You don't have to really build the right cabinets. You can just align them. It's better to have a good cabinet,
sure.
but they can spend less time on R&D of the cabinet, where they can work the DSPs, and maybe with three-dimensional 3D printing, now they can build waveguides and all that. So that has changed. Computer speed definitely changed the workflow,
Right.
and I think the other thing that really, really made a difference is on a community level. If you want to ask a question, back then nobody's going to talk to you.
Right.
Now it's like you throw a,
Everybody's connected by
yeah,
social media. Yep.
social, yeah, and that thing also changed the game drastically, because one is everybody's fighting for their spot. This is like a UFC battle.
Yep.
Okay, hey, I'm looking for a mastering engineer. Boom! In less than 2 minutes, you got 100 people. Give me the track. Give me the track. And fair, I think that's good, because that means people want to do it, and
Right.
there's exposure to that. And I
Right.
think those things really change the game
Mhm.
a
Yeah,
lot.
no, that's some great insight because everybody does get hung up on the technology and really on the I did a show like 2 weeks ago where I was talking about what's important in mastering and what's not important, and in the not important category, I put plugins. And, I really think, like, anybody worth their salt can get a good master. Like, if I put you in a room with 1 analog EQ and 3 plugins, I know you could do a good master. because it's you. And it doesn't matter which plugin you had, you would still do a good master. So I
I
just,
hope so.
yeah.
I'm used to, you know, I'm used to the way I'm working, and
Yeah.
habits are hard to break. That being said, 98% of my work is hardware. And then
Let's talk about that for a second since we're kind of crossing into there. So I also know your name not just from mastering, but also because of your hardware association with, I think it's Handy Amps.
yes.
And so why don't you tell us a little bit about your process as far as your, I would say you're a hybrid kind of guy, like maybe whatever percentage analog versus digital. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your process and how you work?
Okay. Well, I don't divide it to analog and digital. I divide it to hardware and software
Okay.
because converters are not fully analog, they're also digital, and they become part of the sound.
Yes.
So 98% of my work is external, is hardware. In that 98%, there's a combination of either just hardware, like flat out just using the gear, and times where I'll combine the gear with plugins, for example, in sequencing a record, doing some adjustments, and sometimes on singles too. And then there's only like maybe 2%, maybe, that I'll do in the box.
Hmm.
The reason for that is because I like to be very hands-on, meaning like I like to move the knobs, but it's not just give me a controller and it's the same. It's more about knowing the piece of gear and knowing how it reacts.
Right.
So I'll just respond to, okay, this piece of gear will do this, this will do that, and I'll just do that. Where in plugins, it's a bit different for me because plugins live in the same ecosystem. So
Hmm.
it doesn't matter if they're different, they'll still exhibit similar things in terms of their, it's not like loading of a piece of
Right.
gear and it's like, oh, what happened now to the signal? I lost 6 dB, or you know what I mean? Or like, moving from balanced to unbalanced, or moving from, you know what I mean? Or like a vintage piece versus a current piece,
Right.
So you don't have that in plugins, they're all in the same ecosystem. Um, so it's a habit, and I'm cool with that habit. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter to me if it costs me more, because at the end of the day, I want to enjoy what I'm doing, and part of the enjoyment is that.
Right. I get
Okay,
it.
so you can argue, you can bring me the biggest arguments in the world. Oh, hardware, software. One thing you have to understand, and it doesn't matter in the argument anything. What's important is this: one, am I achieving the result I want? Two, how much fun am I having in the process? And three, does the client like it? If we checked all three boxes, it doesn't matter if I worked with a plugin or hardware,
Right. Of
and the
course.
and the argument is useless.
Yeah. I'm not at all a snob about gear or honestly, like I think it's one of the lesser parts of the equation in mastering. Like, I my masters sound the same now as they did 5 years ago with all different plugins as it did 10 years ago with a full analog setup because it's me doing the master. It's not the gear mastering the stuff. So I'm a firm believer that, again, this is conceptual more than gear.
You're right, but I'll tell you. But I have something that might spark kind of a test that you might be
Okay,
able to do.
sure.
The result that you're going to get is never going to be the same, because it always starts when the result is a response to where you're starting. So, for
Right.
example, if I have to put an analogy to running and walking,
Hmm.
if you can walk the same distance, okay, but if I give you a different terrain, you're going to finish the same race, but it's going to be taking a toll on you differently.
Sure.
So if you do a master now in software, you're going to get a certain result. And now I tell you, no software, work the same thing on hardware. You're not going to get the same result. You're going to get something in the style,
Right.
but you're not going to get the same result because the hardware would be kind of a different terrain,
Yeah. No,
meaning
I agree. It's like going off road versus a highway or something.
right. So you'll
Yeah.
have to do things differently to achieve the results that are not the same,
Yes.
but they could be comparable.
Of
And
course.
as a result of that, you might find yourself that in the analog domain, now the feeling is more calm, for example, less tight. But then let's say you started in the analog domain, you did a master, now you're doing it in software, you're like, oh, now it's tighter. Now,
Mhm.
whichever you want, you like, that's a result of comparison afterwards.
Right.
But you're never going to do the same thing in terms of the final result. You might reach a certain goal that is similar.
Yeah. No,
And
I
okay,
think that's fair. Yeah.
because you can't do, like in life, you can't repeat the same thing twice.
Mhm.
Because the moment you are going to repeat it, your mind is already working on fixing what you didn't do before. The same
So
thing happens with a recording. Like when you do a pass and
right,
you listen to it, and you're like, wait, am I happy with it or not? Second time you run it, it's like, oh, I could have done this.
right.
So repeatability is kind of, I mean, you can repeat, but you're never in the same place twice in the same
So
moment.
so speaking of repeating, when I had an full analog setup, one of the biggest issues I had would be we'd be working on a big album and, there'd be, excuse me, there'd be like 15 songs, and then the next day, everything would come in with recalls. How do you handle that?
Oh, we love recalls, right? It's like that's why we came into this profession. It's like, we signed up for it, right? So first thing is I write everything. I'll show you.
Mhm.
So like I have these bunch of papers.
Right.
I like writing on them because what happens is it takes me half an hour just to write them. Okay. And then after I write them, and I make them, I write them in ways that let me really like hone in on as much as possible. But
Mhm.
we already know that analog gear drifts,
Right, of course.
right? It could drift from electricity fluctuations where
Tubes,
even though
heat, yeah.
even though here electricity is real, like I spent a lot of time and money and um work to make it as consistent as possible. But
Mhm.
analog gear drifts,
Sure.
um, tubes and transistors too. So what I do is I'll set it up, I'll listen to it, I'll see if I hear a deviation, then I'll print.
Right.
After the print, I'll listen again and I'll make sure they're close and then I'll measure them. And like it's a process. It's not like, hey, I'm sending you a mix. Could you just replace the one before? It's like, bro,
Right.
it's not replacing. It's actually working on it.
Yeah, I don't think I would be able to survive now in my analog studio of old just because of that. Because I have so many records now that come in with, 18 songs with 7 versions each, and the next day they call me and they say, "We've got, 12 recalls, and we need those 12 songs with 7 passes each now, not tomorrow, now." So, I'm kind of thankful that I kind of switched over for my process, but I also work on a lot of, hip hop, which I don't think you're like a heavy hip hop head, and hip hop tends to go super, super fast. So I think you're lucky in that response,
Well,
regard rather.
well, you know, nowadays even the heavy music is like pop music, meaning they also have revisions, they have deadlines, and they can be also very conservative too. Like, oh, it has to be like this and that. So
Right.
I do have the revision things. Um, I try to be very, let's call it this, calculative
Mhm.
with how I approach it. Meaning, if I know this is going to be something with a ton of revisions, then certain processes I will bake in and leave certain things open, for changes. Like I said, sometimes there is a combination of a plugin and hardware
Right.
because that can happen. So maybe this comes back from my broadcasting days where I was a broadcasting engineer, where there we don't have vibe. We have works or doesn't work.
Yeah.
So when you work in that type, you have to find quick ways to like how to deal with things.
We
So
have that in common, by the way. I worked for CNN, so
really,
yeah.
see, so Another thing in common.
Yes,
So I think when you work in that type of field, you kind of have to learn how to do things with in relative to like time, dealing with emergencies,
deadlines, yep.
good file management. So it's
Mhm.
easy to not have to be like, where did I put that file? Like, it requires a lot of
Organizational
thinking ahead.
skills, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So good managing skills and
Yes.
technical it's not technical ability, it's more of like knowing what leads to what, so you have the flexibility to move with the changes quick.
Right.
Yeah, even if you're doing analog or like even with that, there's ways to be better at it in terms of recallability. Yeah.
So compare, we're talking, timelines now, like older to newer stuff, and you've been working hybrid kind of most of this time, haven't you? I guess more analog in the earlier days, and now like a little more hybrid. Is that correct?
I would say probably I used to be mostly hardware,
Yeah, same here.
and then later on the combination. And I think today, I don't want to say today more and more, because still there's a bunch of stuff that's just hardware. But I would say again, on the in the box thing, I will tend to do that today more than I've ever done before.
Sure.
Because again, the plugins are better now, and I mean, I have an oven now in a plugin. It
Yeah, you
sounds
do.
different still because it's a plugin,
Yep.
but you know, but I
I've used
still
it.
have
Yeah.
I have the whole line. I have the oven, the stove, the grill, the pressure cooker, the cooker, the grill. And by the way, we're gonna have a plugin of the grill.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's, yeah, with the different companies. So that's next. But yeah, having the palette of pieces of gear, and also if I need the plugins, yeah. Um, you know, when people talk about not using gear, I think sometimes they forget that plugins is gear.
Of course.
Like if you look back 10, 15 years ago, you go to a mastering facility website,
Mhm.
they would list the
The
plugins
gear.
they had because each
Yeah.
plugin was like $500, right? So it's like, hey, I got all this thing. And they were proud of what they had because not everybody had all that stuff, right?
Well,
And
all
it,
the old mastering, websites used to have, and myself included, like, back in the day, we had gear lists, like a gear
yes,
page on the website, and you'd see, like, what compressors they had, what EQs they had, what speakers they had.
yes,
So,
I
yeah.
still have. I just never updated that website for a few years. So it's kind of old.
Mhm.
But yeah, back in the day, they would list that because it would be gear.
Right.
And so when people say, when I say, some people say, "Oh, I don't use gear," you do use gear.
Of
They're just
course.
in the form of plugins,
Mhm.
or I like to keep it simple. Then you go and see their session, like 15
Right.
plugins in a row. I mean, that's not simple,
No,
please.
of
Like
course not.
simple is one or two or three, but 15 or whatever.
Yeah.
So let's face the reality. Plugins is gear. The only difference is one sits in a physical space and it's heavy and you got to put electricity to it. If it falls on your leg, it hurts,
Of
you
course.
know? So,
And they have many times, yeah.
yeah. So
So, do you think, as far as the quality of what you receive, like the mixes you get nowadays, do you feel like things have gotten better or worse or the
it's a
same?
mixed bag. I think back then stuff was coming in more concise in terms of like what they wanted to achieve, um, from the mixing, knowing what the mastering will bring to the picture.
Mhm.
And it was more of like, by the time they made the decision was locked.
Right.
And I think today there's a combination. There's more that really put in the effort and make sure it's the right thing. And some of them kind of cook the sound they want, and our responsibility is just making sure the translation is right.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we have others that actually want us to intervene and give it the vibe and give the mojo and the coloration. Um, and I think they have a bit more. There's more people today. doing
Right, of
this.
course.
You know,
Yeah.
back then you had producers, mixers.
Mhm.
Now the artists are the producers, mixers that do most of it.
Right.
So I think the mixed bag that we had before is extended to every direction.
Yeah, I say to people, it's better and worse, both. So,
Yes, like I
yeah.
said, every
Yeah.
direction. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
the the bad stuff is really bad. This week I had some guy who got his tracks from an AI website, then he downloaded some stuff from YouTube, and then he put vocals on from a phone, and he sent it to me, and I just said, this sounds really awful. I don't know what you did to it or what it's from." I said, "It just sounds like a really bad MP3, and, I can't really help you with this." And, he was just like, "I need you to talk to my engineer." I was like, "Look, if your engineer is using, AI websites and YouTube and phones, we don't need to have a conversation," you know? There's no point in this, so.
It's always a dialogue, you
Uh-huh.
know. I think, we're a service industry,
Yeah,
and
I agree, I agree.
and I think we should earn points for what we do,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, when you hear a song on the radio, it's not on its own. It has the production, has the mix, and has the master, and
Yeah,
people remember the result that we're part of. So we should get royalties, we should get points, we should get more than just our
fee.
work for hire fee.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes we're the last resort. We're the only light in the end of the
Yeah.
tunnel for some people, and we have to treat it like that. Sometimes we can't help, but they
Yeah,
need to
no,
hear that.
I totally agree with you, and I was kind of joshing when I said, we have nothing to talk about, but, for me, my father ran a little retail shop, and I saw customer service was the main thing that he always really brought to the table. It was always like, he'll do anything to help you, and I try to keep that work ethic, with me and carry that torch, but I totally agree with you. This is a customer service job, and, you should not lose track of it.
Well, look, sometimes you can't help. Like,
Yeah, no,
there's a point where you're helping by telling the person, I can't help you, because you
yes,
just
no,
saved him money. He could have paid you,
right.
and you did your job, and it will still sound crappy, and he would expect miracles, and he's not getting miracles, and he spent money on something nothing could that didn't help.
You've wasted his money, yep.
You've exactly. So by you telling him that is not always a bad thing. Like, you know, I think that sometimes in this industry, because it's kind of a fear industry. You're fearing to say the wrong thing. You're fearing to do this. You're fearing to change. Sometimes we're afraid to tell a person the problem because we're thinking, oh, he's not going to come to me. He wants to talk to yes men. And it's not really. You're not telling him what they want to hear. You need to tell them what they need to hear, and it's a fine line. And sometimes I read in forums where somebody says, the mastering engineer told me I need to change something in the mix. What do you guys say? And then I see well-respected mastering engineers go and say, fire him. And I'm like, why to fire him? Maybe he's helping this guy. Why are you just throwing out fire him? Why? Because he's not supposed to give an opinion. He's just going to do his job. You know how many records I've done that if I wouldn't give my opinion, those records wouldn't get to where they were sonically? Like, I've had a bunch of times to tell the client or the mixer, you need to change this in the mix, you need to move this and that. And then they come back saying, wow, the mix sounds way better now, even without the mastering yet. And then the mastering really helped it. So I think that we can't grandfather old habits of like, don't talk, just do your job. It's case by case. Sometimes we're helping the artist move 1,000 miles forward just by giving him two quick tips.
Yeah,
I've had times, you know,
I totally agree with you, and I've had both, situations where, the artist has been so grateful that you've extended yourself to say, "Hey, if we tightened up these couple little things, your record's gonna sound a million times better," and I've also had, with some very big names, which I can tell you off the air, where I've said, "Oh, I hear something that's a little wrong, like distortion or something," and I got fired immediately off the job. So,
You know what? I promise you,
mhm,
you did justice for yourself, because later on when it comes out, and if especially if it's a big artist and it doesn't sound good and somebody hears it and they're like, "Oh, who did it?" And then they relate the error that the artist did to you.
mhm,
Okay? If you look at like if you look at the big picture of success, okay? When something fails, everybody's going to just blame, and
the
they're
last
not
guy.
going to blame the real person.
Right.
Okay? There's a saying, for success there's one father, for failure there's a bunch of orphans.
Mhm.
Okay? Now, when there's success cuz you did a good job, nobody's going to look at, "Oh, he told me to do this and I did it and then it really helped." It's going to be like, "Oh, of course. I mean, we did it right, right? Like the artist, we did it right, right?" But that's the thing. It's like, if they fire you because you were honest with them, now there's a difference between saying there's distortion on it. If you don't fix it, I'm not going to work on it. Than saying, look, there's distortion. I recommend fixing it. But if you can't, I'll work with it as is.
Yeah.
Then you're giving them an in saying, like, look, this is what I'm hearing. And then you're keeping the door open saying, if you can't fix it and you want to work with it as is, you're saying, I'm not a snob. I'll work with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
no,
But I,
no, honestly, I very rarely will ever turn away something without a conversation, but, in that case, there was distortion on the track. It was a famous mixer and a very famous producer, and, the mixer immediately said to me, "Well, I put the distortion there on purpose," and I went, "Okay, well, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure." And, next thing I know, the job was at another mastering house, so
you know what? You
can't
can't
win 'em all.
argue with people's emotions
No.
and egos. You
Nope.
know, I had a situation where someone sent me a track and I said, "You did a bounce to disc, right?" He says, "Yeah, but that's how I always do." I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's fine.
Mm,
The reason I'm saying this is because your automation went off." He's like, "Oh, what?" And then he checked and he found that I was right,
right.
and I did the master, but but I didn't get a call back after that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I
egos are
helped him.
fragile. Yeah,
Huh?
egos are fragile. E
Right.
yeah,
But you know what? He should have respected that I caught a problem that he had. Okay? So we're dealing with a mixed bag of stuff, and every day that you think you've seen it all in the music industry comes a new thing you've like, "Oh, I never encountered that. I wouldn't think." So you getting fired from that, sad, but you know what? If they can't deal with that, then you probably would have to deal with so much bullshit afterwards, and everything would be QCing like, "Hey man, I heard that. Yes, I intended for the track to be split in half and have 2 minutes silence in between." Or yeah, I intended that the track would chop in the middle of the ending. Or like, yeah, I mean, do you want that? Like, it's best to feel like you're working with people and you're not walking on eggs. And I mean, you can walk on eggs a bit, but like, "Hey, I hear this thing. Is this intentional or not?" Yes, it is. Okay, no problem. Let's move forward and let's do it. And that's
right.
it. But what can I say? You're dealing with emotions. You're dealing with people not wanting to be like, and to be fair with you, 80% to even more, I'm not looking at the ego thing. I'll communicate. There
Right.
are people where I have to be careful because I know that they're like a loose cannon, you
Mhm.
know, or whatever.
Right.
But in most cases, most of my clients, they're open to that.
Oh, yeah, no, I think this is the, very tiny percentage of clients, like 99% of my clients are fantastic, but
Mhm.
it's just, every once in a while, you'll get somebody that, doesn't take, your advice or critique in the right spirit, and, then things go south, so
Yes, but you know what? If you look at History of the World Part One, movie by Mel Brooks,
uh
there's the Neanderthal human painting something, and then you see the guy peeing on it, and it's
right.
like the first artist, and now it's like the first critic.
Right.
You're always gonna get that. And there's always someone gonna judge your work without
Yes.
knowing what you were handed.
Right. Of course.
It's like, "Oh, it sounds like this." Yeah, well, you don't know what I got, or you don't know what decisions the artist made me do,
Right.
like he so, we just try to aim for the best
Yeah.
with it.
Did you ever, cut vinyl yourself?
No, I only so I did a bunch of mastering for vinyl
Mhm.
releases, reissues, limited editions, remasters, um, and I would be attending cutting sessions, but I
Mhm.
personally never did an actual cut on my own.
Right.
I think that that's something you really gotta do a lot of mistakes and ruin a bunch of lacquer to still you can
Yeah.
really feel safe with it.
Yeah, we had a
So
VMS 70 that we used to have in the old studio, and, I always, think of, cutting vinyl as working on an old car, and, it's very mechanical and it's very physical, and, you really need some mechanical know-how to get through vinyl, so
I can tell you that I'm turning the air condition.
sure.
I can tell you that I've came across really weird situations in vinyl
Mhm.
because a lot of the bands I work with do vinyl releases. So hearing test cuts or test presses, some records are very hard to cut
Right, of course.
because of the recording, actually, not even the mastering or the mix. And you only
Right.
find that out later on. And if you sit with a good cutter, you know, you can try to figure things out and then you learn stuff. And I tried to do that as much as possible, try to get involved, not because trying to be a control freak, the opposite. I want to
Yeah,
be
you
part
you
of
wanna
it.
learn.
So
Yeah.
learning, but also the main thing is making sure I'm helping the client achieve their result. So I'll go to a session, do an attended cutting session and listen and compare and say, can we do this? Can we do that? I'll be doing that. And as long as they have the patience to work with me, then I'll come back there.
Right.
Uh, and I do
So
that.
do you do, separate masters? A lot of times I'll get clients asking, "Do you do a vinyl master for me?" Do you do a separate master for vinyl other than the layouts?
Certain projects, for example, you just mentioned the Dresden Dolls.
Mhm.
So the new record, we did a version that was for CD and streaming, and a totally different version for vinyl. Like not even just the layout, but totally like
Mastered differently.
totally. We did
Right.
2 days of attended sessions and working song by song to get a sound that is different. And then after that, a cutting session as well. So it's very project dependent. Some stuff I only do for vinyl. Like
Right.
there's projects that just come out on vinyl and I do remaster it and then it goes there.
Well,
So
other than the Dresden Dolls, like, what would your normal, process for when a client says, "I want some vinyl," what's your normal, "Here's what I'm gonna give you"?
so you mean when there's a vinyl that is a separate thing or not?
Say it's part of the project, like, in other words, they're doing a streaming release, but they're also gonna put it out on vinyl.
Okay, so certain projects, like I did a record for David J
Mhm,
From Bauhaus, and
mhm,
it was a collaboration with another person. In that case, we had the streaming and the CD, and then in that vinyl, we wanted to keep it as close as possible to the version that exists, but because there's pianos and there's some low end stuff that needs to be very clear,
mhm,
then the vinyl pass was running, with LFE blend, or you want to call it elliptical filter, or
sure,
whatever you want to use the term.
right,
mono so there were certain frequencies that I know that, and it doesn't, you don't have to do that for everything, but in this case there were certain frequencies that I wanted to make sure that there's clarity, from moving through
yeah,
the
for out of
piano.
phase bass and things like that, of
Right,
course, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So we try to keep as close as possible to the masters that are in the CD and streaming, but still taking in consideration the frequencies that might, create issues there. Um, so it's also it's, it's kind of a softer thing too. So yeah, there's stuff like that, and then there's records that from the get go, that this is not going to translate well to vinyl. So Okay, well, let's approach it differently. And sometimes it's from scratch, and sometimes it's taking what's existing and now tweaking it for the vinyl.
Right. So, if you were advising a young upcoming or up and coming mastering engineer, what's like some habits you should develop as a mastering engineer, in your opinion?
In today's music world, which I think, you know, you and I are,
Old.
we have a benefit. No, but we have a benefit because we've seen, it's like history. If we've seen the changes of technology, we've seen changes of how music styles and eras. I think in today's world, if you're starting out, the first thing that I think every new mastering engineer should do is hone on something. Like hone on something you gravitate to. Meaning, if this is something you know well, go that route. Don't try to be everything because it's going to be very hard to get everything.
Right.
Focus on something that you know the aesthetics, you understand what people are looking for, and you already have a knack to doing it. Yeah, like it's like, oh, I know if I do this and this, it would work for you. Like I know
Hmm.
what to listen for. And I think, just like we talked before the show, that there's a certain amount of working mastering engineers, and there's mastering engineers who once in a while do it, and it's not their
Aspiring. Yeah.
right. They're aspiring, or it's not their day to day. They have a different job, and when they have free time, they do it. So
Yeah.
I think that the current ones, they have opportunities that are different than ours because they can just be in the niche that they know, and they can develop there.
Yeah.
So the first thing is like know your stuff,
Hmm.
know what you're dealing with. Um, I wouldn't be trying to be like, uh, I'll do vinyl, I'll do cassette, I'll do, because at the end of the day, what happens is most of the vinyl stuff is not actually like in your control. It's most of them are brokers
Right.
that work with different uh,
Yeah.
pressing plants, and
Hmm.
it's a hit or miss a lot of times.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well,
So
it's the pressing plant and also the plating plant and, everything in between, so it can get ruined anywhere on the
right,
path.
and sometimes there's no plating. If they're
Right,
doing DMM,
right.
then immediately, then so it depends, what way the plant is working, and it
Sure.
can go wrong anywhere from the master to the
Mhm.
cut,
Yep.
to the plating to the DMM, or to whatever, or um even the material,
Yeah,
if the
sure.
if the you know
We used to buy blanks that, would come at that time, there were 2 companies that were selling lacquer
right.
blanks, and, we'd get, like, whole boxes and batches that were all bad. Just just a bad batch. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yep.
now I think there's only one company left.
Yeah, after
No,
the fire. Yeah.
so yeah, and it could also happen in the actual press that sometimes the
Mhm.
material, because it's reused, or I
Recycled, yeah.
think that um one thing that I come across with newer bands is some of them don't know the process, and they're like, oh, we're gonna do vinyl now, and they have all these singles you've done for them, and they just send it to the broker.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's going to be on vinyl, and then it's like, oh, why does it not sound right, or why there's levels here and there different, and why is it thin here, and I'm
Mhm.
like, well, because you need to plan it for vinyl. It's not like,
Right.
oh, we're doing vinyl. You need to plan the
Right.
sides, the length, where songs you want to put where, adjustments.
Yep.
So I think that it's not a bad idea to team up with another mastering guy who has
Mhm.
more experience with that, and then be like, hey, I'm doing this, but maybe you can help me with getting it for the vinyl, or you know, nothing
Yeah.
bad with reaching out to people and asking for help.
No, I think, when we were cutting vinyl, there was a lot of people I reached out to initially to make sure our quality control was right, and, people were always really lovely. I don't know if you know, Paul Gold from Salt Mastering, but he actually flew down from New York to Atlanta,
Wow.
to teach, me and my, other engineer, how to work the lathe, and, you know, uh, you probably work with, Eric from the bakery
I've done a
sometimes.
lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Eric's a good buddy too, and all these people are really kind of very open on their process and happy to share. So,
Right. Like I'll give Eric a call a bunch
mhm.
of times, like, "Hey Eric, I got this record. I'm sending you the stuff. Let me know what you think. And I think it's not fitting the sides. What do you think?" Like the dialogue is so important. And
Yeah,
people like Eric, for example, who worked for Doug, and know this thing inside out,
he's talking about Doug Sachs, a legendary mastering engineer.
right from the mastering lab. And
Yes,
I met Eric when he was working for Doug.
right.
And so we know each other for a lot of years. And there'll be times I'll come and sit with him in an attended session, and we'll try to figure out things together. Like maybe we need to move the flip between the songs. Maybe we
Mhm.
need to lower this you know, it's a process, and the conversation, and the whole dialogue is important. And I think that that's kind of what missing sometimes nowadays, because emails are not that dialogue-ish in a
Right.
way. I mean, you can write and get something back, but by the
Yeah.
time you get something back, your train of thought went somewhere else.
Yeah. Conversation's definitely a better choice here.
Yes, definitely.
So let's see. I'm going to see if anybody's got any questions in the comments here. Blah, blah, blah. No, they're just happy. I'm happy too. Uh, Anything you wanted to chat about before we wrap up our conversation? Because I've kept you over an hour already here.
It's okay. I already when anytime I do a podcast and they tell me it's an hour,
Uh-huh.
I book at least 2 hours. One, for
Okay.
technical difficulties, and two, there's always something that's like, "Oh, let's touch that subject even more." So I was like,
Right.
"Okay, no problem." Um, so one of the things I do want to say that I
Hmm.
think is very important is that, especially because plugins are so easy to get and they have so much options, I think that some of the musicality is getting lost in the
Hmm.
process. And I think that it's easy to be like delivering a result that the client is happy with, and we can't argue with that. But I think the shelf life is
Oh, I
getting lowered.
totally agree. I think that's in the music making as well.
Yeah, but we can't control the music making.
No.
So, it you know, if you can make a record have a bigger shelf life just because what you've done, meaning it's keeping its value there,
Hmm.
then we added even more to the project. We can't control production and music. We might help with the mix because we might give feedback. But I get calls for records I've done 15 years ago, 10 years ago, like almost 20 years ago, it's like,
Hmm.
or people can reference them. Okay.
Right.
And that means that they stand the test of time. It doesn't mean that they sound amazing,
Hmm.
but it means that when people listen to them, they connect to it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm seeing a question from one of our listeners here, and he's saying that the difference he hears in analog versus plugins is the front to back depth, the width, and the height. Uh, that's his only gripe between the difference. And I would say it's not necessarily an analog versus digital thing for me personally. I can kind of still get my depth and perception, in the box as opposed to when I used to work analog. But I think, as you said earlier, like analog moves are just more conservative to start, and you're working with less things. It's less easy to keep adding more and more and more when you're working on an analog setup that you come back to every day. So you're less likely to add one more EQ or one more this or one more of that. I think you make your decisions maybe count more. But I think it's not so much an analog versus digital. I think it's a process of how you work.
It- there is one thing I do have to say about depth and analog.
Mhm.
Because we don't have consistency even in digital, you can lose consistency in a way, but in analog, where the response of the gear is based on what's connected before and after,
Right.
a lot of times the depth element that we're getting in analog is actually not something that was designed.
Mhm.
It's a result, like an artifact.
Right.
And that can happen, especially, when you're using certain gear that, let's say, has a very good transient response, and then you're dealing with something that has a good transient response, but it's softer. So
Right.
what will happen is the transients, which dictate your positioning on the sides, now they get softened, and when they get softened, they kind of become centered,
Right.
because now you don't have this happening, and our ears, that they cipher things by timing. So as you smooth that, what happens is they become more centered,
Right.
because you have less of that. And when you have that center, then your front and back becomes more noticeable.
Mhm.
So it's that's why there is things like that happening in analog,
Mhm.
but it wasn't by design. It
Right.
was a result. Now,
Right.
that being said, in our line, the oven, the stove, the grill, actually by design, we do have those things where the stereo is true,
Right.
meaning it's not dual mono, it's actually responsive, it actually
Mhm.
reacts with each other. And that does create depth. And
Right.
even in the plugin of the oven,
Mhm.
when it was designed, at the end, as they progress with it, that's one of the things we were talking about, getting that 3D as a result of what we're trying to emulate from the analog.
Right.
So there is merits to what he said, but it's not because the analog is the analog. It's a result of a response between pieces and a response between transient. And in our case, we did design it like that.
Right.
But I'm not trying to be not agreeing with you and agreeing with him, but I'm trying to explain the phenomena.
Uh-huh.
And there is a possibility to create a certain amount of that in plugins,
Mhm.
usually with plugins that are trying to emulate the space between the left and the right, meaning the crosstalk and how much of that is
Mhm.
existing.
Okay. So, we have another question here. You up for one more?
Give me 20 more. I'm here.
Okay.
I signed up.
Okay. Uh, so, Adam, is asking, do you take more of a hands-on approach where you may change an aesthetic before a client asks for it, or do you suggest it and see how they react?
Very good question.
Mm.
Most of the times I don't ask. And the reason for that is asking can deliver the wrong message, meaning if you tell them what you're going to do exactly, then either they'll build a defense against it because now you're altering something they're living with, or they'll be like, yeah, and build expectations that in their mind they think what it is.
Right.
Where I will go with this is if I have, let's say, the only time I actually talk with the client about that is, let's say I hear the music and I know that if I'll make it modern, for example, it's not going to give it something cool. It's just going to sound like I put a plug-in
Right.
limiter and boost it. So in those cases, I would come to the client with the approach of, look, I heard this and I know the style, and you guys are sounding like this and this and this. I kind of feel like that's the vibe of it. But I feel that in order to achieve that, I have to go with a sound that reminds me of this. And I think either we should go more dynamic or we should go more pushed or whatever I feel to apply to that. And I'm getting their permission to deviate from where they are.
Right.
But that's only when I feel that I have to explain why I went that route.
Right.
Where in other cases, I'll just do what I feel. And worst case, they say I don't like that,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I still think it comes down to that, we were saying earlier, like, mastering is musicology, and you hire a mastering engineer because of his depth and breadth of knowledge of, music that hopefully yours fits into their, wide catalog of knowledge, but you're pulling on their experience, and you would hope that your ME, your mastering engineer, is gonna guide you in the right direction. So for me also, I don't usually like say, "Hey, I want to make this more vibey or vintage or blah blah blah." I'll just do it and send it to them. And if the client doesn't like it, then I'll certainly happily do a revision or listen to what he didn't like about it. So, but most of the time, it's the right call because what you feel is usually the right thing.
Well, and we always have to remember that what we're hearing in that moment is a reflection of how at that moment it hits us.
Right,
The next day it could hit us differently, and there's times where you're like, "Oh man, what did I do?" The next day you come in, it's like, "Oh, now I got it." Um, so it's always a representation of that certain moment, and also there's expectations. Okay,
right,
a client builds his expectations. They'll say, "I want it loud, I want it bright, I want it clear, I want," and then they're like, "Oh, no, 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 I wanted something else." They can state certain things that don't match up with what they want.
right,
I had a record. This was like a funny situation. A band was the music was good and everything was cool, and they're like, "Oh, we want to sound like a '90s reggae pop." Okay, I was like, and they gave me reference,
right.
and I listened to what they're doing, and I was like, I don't think they really want to sound like that,
Hmm.
but they insisted, so I made them sound like that, and
Yep.
I gave it to them, and they're like, "Oh,
We don't like
wow,
this.
right. Now we
Yeah.
sound like that and we don't sound good." I was like, "Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying."
Yep.
And I made them sound like that, and
I'm sure
then
you
they
did. Yeah.
realized it's not the right approach. And so I told them, "Look, there's a big difference between what you like to listen to and what you can sound like.
Right.
And if you sound like what you like to listen to, it doesn't always mean it's going to make you sound the best."
Yeah, and also I think a lot of clients don't know why something sounds good. I used to have clients all the time that would bring in Dr. Dre, the Chronic, and say, "Oh, this is the bass I want. This has got so much bass." And I don't know if you ever like really listened to that album, but there's almost no bass on that record. Everything's just crystal clear and really well produced with really great source material. So what they really liked was a really good production that was balanced, not a bassy record at all. So,
Mhm.
you
It
know,
could be that the bass was tight and
yeah,
clear,
exactly.
and they
Hmm.
were looking for something that has a clarity in the low end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's learning how to translate what your client wants. Again, is that customer service aspect of the gig. I think so.
If you think of it, it's a guessing game.
Yeah.
You're doing what you think, and you're hoping that the client will be happy.
Yes.
And if they are, great.
I think, as long as we've been around, that means we're probably still making more people happy. So, I think we're, probably both okay.
Yeah. And every engineer has a bag of crappy stuff, bad stuff, okay stuff, good stuff, better stuff, and amazing stuff.
Right.
And our goal is to add more to the amazing and better and great, and less to the bad. And but it happens, and there's always going to be something that you're going to be putting here and there. And it's like thinking that there's these mixing engineers that never have a reject, and you're like, or never get fired. You're like, "Oh, he always probably makes it on the first or maybe third time max. And
Right.
then you don't even know, but he got fired." Like, we're at the end of the day, we're at the mercy of what we're given to work with
Mhm.
and the expectations that the client is putting in front of us.
Right.
And if we meet those expectations, great. And if we give even more, then even better. Hopefully, they'll appreciate that and come back again.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I was saying, we're both 3 decade something mastering engineers. And I think, all of my clients from the 90s and beyond still come back to this day. So, and I think probably the same for you. So I think, hopefully we're doing some stuff right. So,
I hope so.
yeah,
And
you,
to
you can only
me,
hope.
right. And to me, 3 decades in the biz is to me more about 3 decades doing audio,
Right.
and taking the aspects of that
I'm
into
4
account.
decades doing audio. So.
So yeah, you got 4 decades.
Yeah.
You're a bit older than me.
I'm a little older than you, yeah.
Right. So yeah. So that's how I look at it, is we brought in all the aspects, and I was lucky that when I came to America, I worked for a very famous producer, Sylvia Massey. So
Who I know,
seeing
yeah.
her work with bands,
Mhm.
It was interesting, and you learn a lot about bands, you learn about the communication and seeing how the production flows, and so, even though it wasn't mastering, but I learned from that aspect
Oh, of
things
course.
that I could apply to my mastering.
Yeah, I used to, sit with Sylvia on the Grammy producer and engineer, committees,
Mhm.
and, we didn't really, like, get to know each other well, but I've always really, respected her approach to things. She's kind of an eccentric, kinda unique person, so
Well, that's why it fit for me, because I like different stuff, and I like experimenting in the studio, and back then it was a bunch of hardware, and that was, for me, like a kid in a toy store.
yeah, yeah, I feel you.
So yeah, it was fun. Now,
Yeah,
do
so
we have more questions?
I don't think we have any more, like, proper questions, some
Come on,
comments.
people. We want to hear you.
Anybody else wanna get in a question before we go unlive?
It could be even an argument, like Monty Python. I came from an
Make us
argument.
argue. Make us,
Yeah.
cage fight? Anything you wanna see here? Come on.
Myth. Ask us to blow up my.
Alright. Any mastering myths you wanna talk about?
Nobody, huh?
Nope. You know what happens on this, we usually get, like, the 2nd day is when everybody kinda tunes in. So,
Then they ask questions
yeah.
too little too late.
Oh, we got another one here. Let's
Oh,
put this one up. Yeah. From Tani, to both of you, did you both I guess learn mixing first? Um, I'll let you go first.
when I worked for Sylvia, I actually did some mixing for her. I
Mhm.
didn't. It's not like it wasn't like I did a course in mixing or something, like in a school or something. But I worked in studios, and I worked in rehearsal studios, and I did some live sound. So by the nature of the work, you're mixing. Live, you're mixing.
Right.
My chair is squeaking.
It's okay.
And then, of course, when I worked for Sylvia, I worked on some records. The first record I worked for her, I mixed 2 songs on a Grammy-nominated Zydeco record.
Buckwheat Zydeco?
It was Lisa Haley, King
Oh,
Cake,
okay.
and it had a rubbered thing, and it
Mhm.
so I had experience in mixing, but I don't call myself a mixing engineer, because what I did there is mixing with gear, and I wasn't like tuning vocals in the mix or editing drums or anything. It was more just like these are the tracks and
Right.
doing the EQ and blending. But I had bands of my own in the past which I mixed, and I didn't have the best environment, so I probably didn't know what to do and didn't have the
Mhm.
experience. But yeah, so I had some experience in mixing, but you don't have to have experience in mixing in order to be a good mastering engineer.
Yeah, I agree. One of my, friends, Stefan, at Abbey Road, he never went into the studio basically before he became a mastering engineer. He definitely worked with music, but, he didn't go the traditional path and, he does great
Right.
work, so
I know Stefan. He was here. He actually
Oh,
visited
okay,
me. Yeah.
nice.
So we
Uh,
we we know some of the same people, and
I'm sure we know a
and
lot of the
a
same people.
lot. Yes. And so yeah, so that's an example, like yeah, I did recording, I did mixing, yeah, because I had bands of my own. I was performing with bands and recording. So yeah, I had that experience, but you don't really have to come from that. It's not a bad idea knowing it,
Mhm,
and but basically what's important is knowing music, knowing the tools that you work with, and learning them in the process of doing it.
for sure.
Yeah. And
And to
making
answer
mistakes, it's not a bad thing.
yeah, uh to answer, to Tommy, for me, I was a producer first back in the '80s, and a mixer in the late '80s, early '90s, and then I started mastering in the '90s, so, um, and we got more questions here. Doo 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 doo. How do you feel Here we go. How do you feel about mixers mixing through limiters?
I'll let you start.
Okay. Um, I always tell people that if you mix into a master bus chain that is part of your vibe and feel, I don't want you to undo it. But if you are mixing into a limiter just for volume, I do want you to undo it. So if it's a vibe thing, if it's a limiter that has a certain character or kind of quality that you like about it, that's what I want. I want that print. But if it's not a character thing, if it's a volume thing, take it off. That's for me.
So back in the day, and this is why I'm saying this, it's very important. Most limiters were not under the hood limiters, meaning they had a bunch of processing. They were very straightforward, like
Maximizers.
maximizer, like
Mhm.
an L2, like whatever,
Right.
right? And that if that was mixed into or taken off, you could basically replace it easily because you could just put it back, and even if it was now popping out, snares were jumping, you could do things. The current or modern limiters are actually a combination of complex multiband, complex clipper, saturation, a bunch of stuff that now every little thing that is mixed into them, once you take them off, everything changes because
The
now they
mix will
have
fall apart. Right.
mixed fall apart because you have
Mhm.
tonal changes, you have transient design, like everything is inside there. Now, if you can mix to a mix bus with just a limiter, then the limiter is the only thing that's making those changes. If you mix into like a top down mixing with the EQ, limiter, compressors,
Right.
saturation, then there's more elements that are going to be affecting the result. It's kind of
Yes.
like a bottleneck. You have this mix and now you're like taking it to this element, like shortening the width, like not with
Right.
stereo, but like what the process is applied. So in those cases, anything you're going to pull out is going to be a gigantic change. Okay. Unless you only pulled the last element, which let's say was doing a dB, maybe. But then even then, so I asked the clients that do things like that, I asked them to send me a loud version, which is the reference of what the client is listening to, with the limiters, with everything, at the same sample rate and bit depth if they can, and the mix. And
Right.
then to make sure we're on the right path with the mix, I usually do like a conversation with them and try to figure out how's their mix bus. If they tell me it's all these elements, I'll tell them keep it on, and just maybe the last limiter either gave me one with a bit less limiting or without, but keep all of that in.
Right.
If it's just a limiter only, and I know which limiter, like they'll tell
Yeah.
me, then I can say, okay, give me with that, and maybe either without or a lower setting. But it's
Okay.
very important to have the dialogue because
Yes.
now it's not just mixing into limiters. It's these limiters are way beyond their name limiters. They're much more involved in the
Yeah.
processing.
It's like I said, it's a vibe thing for a lot of those, and, especially if they were listening to that while they were mixing, a lot of their mix decisions were critical to that, so
Yeah. If you were mixing to an L2, old L2, a Waves L2, not a Pro L Fab filter,
right,
then if it would start being like rumbling, like moving, then you have a lot of low end. So you would tweak the low end and now it will be stable, right?
right,
So if you take it off or put it on, it would be easier to fix that by putting it back again.
right.
But anything that has internal processing that does saturation, clipping, multiband, wave shaping, all the stuff that you see in later ones, because they have to do it in order to achieve high volume, high levels, then you might as well keep it and maybe do an alteration.
Right. Alright, we've got more here. You wanna keep going? It's up to you here.
Yes, yeah, let's
Okay.
do it, man. I'm having
Alright.
fun.
Okay, good. That's the whole point
I'm
of
just
this.
my air conditioning here is just that sometimes I have to because the gear is hot. That's the thing with analog. It's hot.
You're in the opposite. You're in the desert in California, and I'm in Reykjavik, Iceland, so,
Yeah.
no air conditioning here, but we have, other problems, so,
I think the
um
analog gear doesn't work in your area. It freezes. It's like, I don't want to do this.
Let's see what we got here. Let me show this one. How do you guys approach adding saturation and distortion onto your masters, if any? Mala,
So I'm going to be technical for a second. Any
go for it.
distortion is a function of a saturation. Not every saturation is a function of distortion, meaning every saturation is a distortion form. but it doesn't have to be called distortion, meaning it doesn't have to go to the realm of like, oh, it's fuzzy and buzzy. Okay. Um, a lot of analog gear has a coloration element, and then there's certain times where the piece of gear is beneficial for the process, and certain times is actually degrading the process.
Sure.
And that's where you pick and choose. Okay. Now, to get actual saturation, the word is a very loose term. A lot of times it's not saturation. We call it saturation, but it's just gain.
Right.
Okay. And then sometimes it's the behavior of the piece of gear, which we will call it saturation, but it's just a function of getting to a place where it just introduces a character, which doesn't have to be a distortion. Okay. I do use that a lot. Not my go-to, meaning when I do choose saturation, it will be very controlled saturation. And then I will choose the tonality of the saturation. That's where, like, I have all the line of gear. We have, the oven, the stove, the grill, the pressure cooker, the cooker with the handy amps. And then I have other gear I did with Roger Foote from Foot Control. So I
Mhm.
have the workshop, the bench, the torch. Then I have all the other
I
stuff.
love your naming configurations, yeah.
I try to make it inspiring for me. And then I have stuff that's super subtle. Like I did with Sonic Farm, I made the master knot, and that's like super, super clean, but it has a feel to it.
Mhm.
So I'll use saturation as a palette, like of colors to play with, and which
Right.
ones I can combine. To get into distortion, that's a very, very rare place I will get to, if I've ever get to. And I've done some stuff that was distorted, but it was an aesthetic decision that we wanted there.
Yeah.
But that's a so small percentage, you
Yeah.
know. And then
And
the saturation is the wide gamut. And usually I'm not going to this area, I'm going to the beginning area.
yeah, and just to represent that in the box world, it's kind of the exact same thing. Every type of saturation has its character, has its color, and you have to know where and when you want to kind of apply those if you want to apply them. So I think kind of pre-post certain things. Different types of saturation will really enhance things. Other times. Really will degrade a signal. So it's an experience thing. You have to feel it out and see if it kind of adds to the vibe or takes away from the vibe.
Yeah.
So that's on my end. So
I can
uh,
add to that that in analog, as much as it's more forgiving
mhm,
compared to the digital saturation, the problem with the analog is that the less the device is good, the degradation becomes much more of a problem.
mhm,
So if you don't find the right pieces of gear to actually do this with, then you're actually not having fun because it's not helping it. It's actually ruining it faster.
right,
In plugin worlds, you have, even if the plugins are more similar and less forgiving, the increments that you have in plugin domain give you more like small areas where you can be like 0.20111,
right,
and it's easier to find that sweet spot, where in analog it's a research. It's like, well,
right.
this doesn't fit, let's try the other piece of gear.
Yeah,
It's a broader span.
yeah. No, I totally agree with that. You want some more?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Uh, Going up on here. So DeWaldo Music says, "Do you like monitoring with a flat response or with a little house curve?" I know Glenn has headphones and doesn't use EQ crossfeed, but curious about Maor and what he does in his room.
So every room that I was in was different, and it's just the nature of the physics of it. But the last two rooms that I've been in, which is this room, which I've been here for quite a lot of years, and the room that I was before, that was like a decade, um, it's not a flat room. What it is it has a good response in terms of timing,
Right,
meaning I'm not going to get this bass that will stay longer and start to dampen the high frequencies, or I'm not going to get these weird reflections that become really annoying. And so you you make the curve as best as you can. Remember, you're dealing with physics, okay, and how much you can control it. And then with that, it has to have some kind of familiarity to what you know. And of course,
Right.
it could be better because you're improving it. But if you're going to work in a flat room, you need to be acquainted with flat.
Yeah.
It's not easy listening to something flat.
No, I mean, most studios are more kind of Harman curvy than flat anyway for most of the rooms I've worked out of, so
Headphones, like I've worked with headphones that are closer to the flat,
mhm,
and it takes a quick, adaptive
adjustment time, yeah,
adjustment.
yeah,
And sometimes it could bother you because now you're hearing a lot of these frequencies that are annoying, and you
mhm,
need to know that, wait, it's not really like that. It's kind of
right,
like that. You know, some of them are very close to what's real. Um, but in a room, you have the sweet spot and you have the outer portion of the sweet spot, which is also important.
right, off
Um,
axis.
I think it's important to make sure that your room doesn't have a buildup.
Yeah,
That's the first thing.
yeah,
And then on the time
cancellation.
domain, make sure it dissipates the low
Mhm,
end.
yeah. We got another one here.
What do you think, Glenn?
I mean, I still have a room with speakers, even though I do use headphones. If I pan the camera this way and that way, you would see a pair of large speakers. And so this room was kind of a self-built room that I did here. My last couple rooms were from Francis Manzella, who built Sterling, the old Sterling anyway. And uh, those were great sounding rooms. And this room, because I work so much in headphones, I didn't want to put that much resource into like perfecting my room. I got good. I can listen, I can monitor well, but is it perfect? No. And when I want really to double check like perfection, and it's not anything to do with the speakers because my speakers are fantastic, I go back to headphones.
Mhm.
So that's me. Um, Here we go. From Moses, is an amazing mix already loud even with headroom, thus making mastering easier? I got to sneeze. Hold on. Ah, okay. Um, Sorry about that. I don't really understand this question. Is an amazing mix already loud even with headroom, thus making? Do
I
you
think he
understand that?
means I think he means that if the mix sits really, really good and already
Mhm,
has the level, if
mhm.
that makes our job tweaking it easier.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Yeah. So, can I just throw in my 2
Mhm.
cents really quick?
Do that. Yep.
So, if a mix already has clarity from good source material and really is popping even at a lower volume, yes, it makes my job so much easier. When you have good source material and that's been handled respectfully in the mix, it makes my jobs 1,000 times easier. So I'll hand it over to you now.
I would say it's all in the eye of the beholder, meaning, we will get these calls saying, "Hey, the mix already sounds amazing." They'll tell us about it, and then we'll hear it, and it's not where they're saying it is.
That's a
So
different story. Yeah.
let's start with this: that everybody has an opinion and what they think they have in their hand. Now, if they don't and they think, then we can tell them what we think, and
Right.
then they'll make the decision based on our input. Now, when the case is like that, it doesn't make it easier in terms of like it's easy.
Hmm.
It makes our judgment calls differently, meaning
Yes.
it's easier to ruin it. So we have to be careful too,
Yes.
and treat it as like this is where it should be already, and we need to see how much we can improve upon it. And sometimes it will even stay at the same volume or
Hmm.
half a dB louder. It doesn't always have to be like 3 dB louder to 6 dB louder. It could stay in the realm of where it was, but we can try to tweak it to make it sound better.
Right.
Okay, and that's also a challenge on its own.
Yeah,
you know
I agree.
it's like, I'll give you an analogy. If you have a good pizza, okay, and now you're adding some spices because you got these bags of spices. There's a point of you adding spices where now you've changed the taste of that pizza to a place where, like, if you added a bit, it works, but now you added too much, it's not.
Yeah.
So this is where tastes and experience and being in the same, in synchronicity of what it needs to be. That's where it's important to be.
Yeah, no, I always say that, like, there's basically, when I get a mix, there's a meter that goes, like, from one extreme, like, enhancement, and then the other extreme is preservation, and you have to decide where on the scale you're going, whether it's, straight in the middle. Is it gonna be more preservation, like we were talking, like, somebody hands you something that's really wonderful, or if it's gonna be enhancement if it needs some help,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's kinda my thoughts on that. Let's see, anybody else? We got a couple, like, specific plug-in questions. I'm not gonna take those today. Uh, how would I tighten hip hop, low end, and mastering? That's, very specific to each track you get, so there's no general answer for that, sorry. Uh, think that's all we got. People, you got any more questions? We got, one of the best mastering engineers to answer your questions here at your disposal, and then you've got me.
You had a list of questions.
I do. I have, like, more stuff. Uh, let's see.
Just a second. I'm muting for a second. Something. Just a
Yeah, no
second.
problem. Hello, people. Are you wanting some more here, or are we getting to the point of where we're, boring you? Because I have more questions to ask, rather. Would you like some more? Let us know. All right, I'm not really seeing any feedback here.
I'm back.
He's back. All right. I asked if they want any more questions, and there's no response here. So,
Uh,
um, let's see if there's anything on my little list here that we didn't really cover. Doo-doo-doo-doo. All right, here's a good one. After all these years, what still excites you about mastering?
I think the challenge. It's like there's a challenge where you're trying to read the music, like you're listening to it, and you're like, what am I getting from it? Like, what am I absorbing from it besides the melodic and rhythmic structure? Like, what does it come out from the speaker to me? Like, am I feeling some kind of an emotional thing with certain instruments that move me more, or is it, there's ear candy, or if I catch the lyrics. I had a song I was working on recently, and the lyrics were so good. It was like about a soldier coming back with PTSD,
Mhm.
and it was saying that they don't come the same, but they're all different. They come out different, each one, and how they deal with it. And just it struck me, and I was like, wow, this is really deep. So a lot of it is, what do I absorb from it? And even genres that are like eclectic, it's like, how can I extend that feel? How can I make the eeriness even more? How can I make that fear feel even more? Or the drama, or you know what I mean? Or how can I make the groove move?
Right.
So that's still exciting, especially if you don't struggle with it more, like, oh, I can do this and that, like the struggle is sometimes part of it, but when you feel that you are connecting to it, and I think that still excites me, especially because that's the music I listen to now. It's the music I work on.
Right. Do you listen to music when you're off?
Not as much as I would love to. It's just when you're working so much,
Yeah.
silence is a blessing if you can get some of that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, silence, thank you. You're hearing music, and you're not just hearing it like for pleasure. You're hearing it
You're
on the,
concentrating. Yeah.
yeah. You're like a vacuum cleaner, like
Mhm.
you're, and it's like pressure. You're
Yeah.
listening to it in such deep level that it can fatigue you. You get tired after listening, and so sometimes I will listen to something for fun, but I'll try to revert to, like, not going to listen. Give me some quiet time.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I always tell people, If you work in a bakery, it's probably you're not gonna come home and eat cake, and, it's not that you don't like cake, you're overexposed at a certain point, and you need some balance in your life, so
Yeah. And the I used to listen to music in the car driving,
mhm,
right? Because it's fun, right?
yeah, I
But I
still do.
actually a lot of times find it better not to listen to music and just to think,
Yeah,
because I need that space, and then ideas come into mind.
yeah, no, I don't listen to music like, so much earbuds or anything like that, but, in the car, I still do, and, like, when I'm home, it's kind of podcasts, just podcasts, so,
Gotcha.
yeah,
I try to balance my time without music, so when I listen to music, it's just new to me.
mhm,
There are times where I'm not gonna work that time and I can put some songs, or after sometimes I'll put I still listen to CDs, by the way,
good for you.
okay? And I have a bunch of and I got a CD here connected in digital to the DAC. It's like it's fun listening
I've
to
got
CDs.
boxes and boxes of CDs.
So, yeah, I still have them, and
Yep,
I had a guy yesterday here coming, and I told him he was a big fan of Depeche Mode,
mhm,
and he loves Violator, and I love that record, and I
yeah, it's a
told
great
him,
record.
I said to him, "You're gonna hear things you've never heard in that record,
Mhm,
and you're gonna have a different listening experience." And he's like, "You really?" I'm like, "Yeah." I put the record, and he's like, "Wow."
yeah,
He heard it so differently. I was
of
like, "I
course.
never heard those little things. I never noticed that, the change in the stereo image and the change of." And so, yeah, don't 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 downplay CDs. They sound better than the high res files that you might even get today.
Yeah, and, honestly, it's still the best format in the last 30 years that we've had, that could reliably, uh, deliver good stuff, and, except for, like, the early stuff where they went a little too crazy, everything else was pretty darn good for in my opinion anyway.
I think that CD is the best format for musicians because it's cheap to make. It's like a dollar or two,
Right.
and you can sell it for 10, $15, whatever, and make a good profit. And it keeps the quality, and people can sign it. You can
Yeah.
sign it. I mean, I'm sad that that format kind of, I can't say went away because I still make CDs. I still do
They
deals.
do, and there's a little resurgence right now, so
Right, and I think it's good, and
yeah,
I
I
think
think it's great.
if people will go back to that, then it's cheaper than making vinyl, it's cheaper than even cassettes,
Mhm. No,
and it's a
I
good
think
form.
I think, people downplay how good 16-bit audio was back in the 90s, 80s, 2000s, but there was great 16-bit audio, at that time, and, I used to have the Sony, the PCM 30s and, all that stuff, and, all the D to make DDPs on, and, oh my god, that stuff sounded great.
Because it was done right,
Exactly.
and that's the thing, we have to remember when people put time and doesn't have to be money, but they invested in making the record sound good, then it
Mhm.
didn't matter if it was 16-bit 44.1. You're looking at a 90 96, you know, 96 dBs of range. I mean, you're not gonna use most of it anyway, like, so why can't 16-bit 44.1 sound amazing? It can. You
It
just
can,
need to
totally.
make it sound good. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep. We got another question here. What are you listening for first when you first hear a mix sent to you?
Glenn, you wanna answer that first?
I can. For me, I listen to again, we're back to musicology. Where does this fit in the big picture musically first? So is it, jazz? Is it this kind of jazz? Is it this kind of jazz? I'll kind of find a category for it. And then I'll listen to the balance, the overall tonal balance. Is there problematic stuff? Is there something sticking out of the mix that's going to be a problem for a master later? So I listen to things that don't really sit well in the mix. And if I can get past that, where I go, nothing's really sticking out in the mix, then I'm ready to start, working maybe. But before that, it's always uh, music, genre, and then mix. Just the is there a problem in this mix or is there not? Maor?
Um, you kind of said it as is.
Okay.
I will say the word musicology was a perfect example. I think every mix gives you clues to what's the status of it and where you need to head with it. And
Right.
it starts first with, okay, this is the genre, this is the territory. Maybe if it's from Europe, like in metal, you have death metal from Sweden and you have death metal from Florida,
Right.
and you had, or so it kind of gives you the hints where it's going to. So what
Mhm.
type of style, what type of territory, what type of aesthetic? Is it a lo-fi type sound or a hi-fi type sound?
Right.
So you're deciphering those elements first. And then the next stage is, how are the balances?
Yep.
There's records that don't have good balances but have a good vibe.
Sure, like
You can't
Metallica or
fix the
something.
balance,
Yeah.
but you can work on the vibe.
Sure.
And some records have great balances but don't have any vibe. Now you're going to work the vibe of it.
Mhm.
And some have both of them and some don't have any. But you kind of work them based on that. And then if there's things that hinder the mix or hinder the master because they're hindering the mix, then you make the decision, should I call them and ask to make changes, or you work with it as is.
Yep.
I try to I try to find the way that improves the mix first, because the way to deal with it in the master is going to hinder the result anyway.
Mhm.
So first of all, check what can be done in the mix, and if can't, then do it in the master.
Yeah, I think I want if I ever get merch for this show, I want it to be, "Mastering his musicology" shirts, so that'll be my merch.
Send me one.
I will. Um, we got another question here. You still good here?
Yeah, yeah, I got a
Okay.
few more.
Alright.
Yeah.
Anytime you wanna tune out, just let me know here. So, from Adam again, what do you find to be the biggest issue sonically you consistently find problematic in mixes you are sent? Up to
Glenn,
you. No, no, no. You first, my friend.
me?
Yes.
The first thing is low end. That usually happens because a lot of stuff is done in home studios. So you can hear if they have too much low end, or the low end is not uh, balanced right, and it affects stuff. Second thing is over processing. That's probably something that's happening more and more,
Yes, it's
because even
inevitable.
if they have good low end, because now they have like Trinov or PS Audio or good room correction, but now the other problem is over processing, and they don't listen to it too much. Like they hear it, they're in the zone, and then it's like, yeah, it's a bit baked, but that was the vibe. How do you unvibe that? Difficult.
Yes.
So I think that that's the second biggest issue, but it probably will become the first issue in time.
Yep.
And then the third issue is just, if you live with a mix for a long time, you're getting used to the inconsistencies in it and the imbalances. And that happens a lot too, especially
Yep.
when you work on a record for a long time. Um, Records that have done for a long time, they either suffer from people getting used to
Overthinking.
stuff
Yeah.
over, or they're so perfect. They've done like every little thing. And it's not always a suffering, because it could be a good thing, but
Right.
sometimes they're very clinical to that point,
Mhm.
which I would prefer more clinical than problematic, because I can always color the clinical and make it sound a bit different. But the
Right.
problematic, now it requires a lot of back and forth,
Yeah.
and I've had times where I would tell the client to do certain things, and of course it's not like the happiest moment, but then they come back and saying, "Oh, you know what? Good thing you said that,
Yeah.
because that made the big difference for us."
Yeah. Yeah, for me, like, my biggest enemies, when somebody hands me a mix, usually, I'd say my number one, uh, problematic thing would be hi-hats. And, hi-hats, tend to be over exaggerated, too loud, and sharpened up usually with EQs, which is just the opposite of what people should be doing. So they're too loud in the mix, they're piercing, and they're not sounding like hi-hats anymore. And that happens even with drum machines. So that's my number one. Two, I'd agree with you on the bass end of things, because usually the bass isn't sitting exactly kind of where it should be. And three would probably be vocal levels, where I 90% of the time would prefer just a tiny bit more vocal. Not everybody, but a lot of the time. So,
I agree that the vocal level sometimes it's either too much or too little.
mhm.
It's not always in the in the spot it needs. Regarding hi hat, there is another problem that I didn't mention that happens where you have a lot of high end, but the vocals are dull,
Oh yeah,
or vocals that are bright but dull hi hats. And then whatever you want to try to fix on the hi hat, you're now ruining for the vocals, and the opposite. You're trying to fix the vocals, you're ruining the hi hat.
right.
Hi hats do tend to make problems, especially if those are real drums and they're leaking to the room mics and the overheads, and then you get these. And what happens is you're getting the sound of a direct mic plus the compression coming from the room mic and the overheads, and it's the sustain is longer, and it has a wavy feel like a.
Yep.
Um, that happens. Um, those cases, a lot of times I will call the mixer and say, "Can you
Help me
lower the
out.
hi hat
Yeah.
and check the compression on the overheads,
Mhm.
versus the direct sound."
Yep. I think actually, for two Jewish guys, like bitching about something is the perfect way to end something with this. So, uh, nobody has the art of complaining it down better than we do. So, um, I
You
would
know, the
say,
more you complain, the more God lets you live.
so, first of all, I just wanted to thank you so much for spending literally a couple hours. I thought I was going to have you for like 30 minutes. So, thank you for staying so long. I appreciate it. I think you do fantastic work. And everybody, please check out some of his projects. And if you don't know them already, and thank you so much, Mala.
Thank you for having me, and I wish everybody all the best. And let's keep this business alive. Whether you're recording, mixing, mastering, producer, let's not give in to like shortcuts of what AI can bring to us. Because at the end of the day, even if it's helping us, it's actually taking us out of the equation. So be aware you're not playing with it; you're teaching it.
Well said. And for everybody, we'll see you next week. And thanks for watching.
Bye.